The general election is just 92 days away and early voting is fast approaching. There's some new poll numbers out there that indicate that presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden actually has an advantage over President Trump in two key southern states. Our CBS News Battleground Tracker finds Biden 4 points ahead of President Trump in North Carolina. Meanwhile, Georgia is shaping up to be a much tighter race as the former vice president leads there by just 1 point. So for more on this, let us bring in Natasha Korecki. You are a 2020 reporter for Politico. Thank you so much for joining us, Natasha. President Trump won both of those states in 2016, which is why it's so interesting that Biden is polling higher. What are some of the factors in those states that may be influencing these poll numbers?
Well, the most obvious one is, of course, COVID and how President Trump has been handling COVID, and how that there is an extension by the governors in those, well, not in North Carolina, but certainly in Georgia, how some of that has been handled there. We've seen a resurgence in a lot of the Sun Belt states, for one, but for another, we've seen a resurgence across the country. Poll after poll shows that Americans just don't like the way that Trump has handled the pandemic. They don't think that he's had control of it. They don't like some of his going back and forth on it and so forth. And Biden has, tried to be a voice of reason. He's tried to, come out with his own plans. But I think mainly what's happening right now is, Biden has sort of been, they say in the basement, but he has kind of been out of the limelight. They're pretty much allowing Trump to sort of, make this election a referendum on his presidency. And when there's more focus on the presidency, that's exactly what, it's exactly what a candidate wants in this kind of in the general election. Biden doesn't want it to be about him. He wants it to be the focus to be on Trump and how he's handling these things.
Right. This coronavirus pandemic has made it challenging for Joe Biden because, I know he does a lot of virtual events and he's had a handful of sort of public events, but the virtual events just don't get the same level of coverage as obviously the president speaking in the Rose Garden about, say, the coronavirus. But we are learning, CBS News has learned, that Joe Biden has been expanding his campaign staff in Texas, of all places. What does that tell you about the strategy? Do the Democrats think that Texas could be, in contention?
Well, it's been interesting. The Biden campaign's been talking about Texas for a few weeks now. They did buy their first ad a couple of weeks ago in Texas. And, some might say this is a little bit of a mind game by the Biden campaign. Certainly, the numbers look good for Biden right now. I mean, he is either polling dead even or a little bit ahead in Texas. Texas has also been another one of these COVID states where they saw a resurgence. They saw how the governor handled it there, and it's coming right back to them. And Governor Abbott's backtracking quite a bit on it. Having the fact that Biden campaign's adding staff there, I think is incredibly interesting. I mean, this is, of course, a state that Democrats have not been able to win in a presidential election since Jimmy Carter, and to be a threat there is really a commentary on how the map is changing so much in this election. And, at the very least, you could say that it is a mind game with Democrats, where if you can force Republicans to have to defend in their own states, and states that are typically very safe for them, then that means that they're not spending as much money in Michigan, where we've seen Trump go dark recently, or in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, and certainly in Florida. These are all key battleground states for Democrats. If they can kind of go into the areas where Trump and Republicans typically have a lot of strength, then they're making them defend in places they wouldn't typically have to do that. And then Democrats would attempt to move into some of these other states, including Georgia, including Arizona, which is become part of the broader map for Democrats.
Oh, that is fascinating. All right, so I want to talk about the Veep stakes with Joe Biden. You write in a Politico article that aides for a number of the contenders are sort of constantly scouring the internet or any media outlets to find out if they can get any hints as to what way Joe Biden may be leaning. That they've taken sort of different strategies with some lesser known candidates doing a lot of TV interviews, perhaps in the hopes of raising their profile. This is dragging on a bit, I think. Do we have any idea when we will hear Joe Biden's pick? Is this part of the strategy, too, to create some sort of buzz and conversation about Biden by having this thing drag on?
Well, I think, a couple things. One, it dragged on because, of course, they delayed the convention. And typically the VP pick is chosen right before the convention to create some momentum going into the convention. Of course, the convention is not going to be conventional this time around. It's going to be very different, much smaller, much fewer people. I mean, we're talking about 300 people there. As far as making this drag out, I think it's driving every single one of these women crazy, as well as their staff members and every reporter who was hoping that this would conclude this week. But, really politically, there is no reason for Biden to rush this. I mean, from his standpoint, why give Republicans any more time to sort of start picking these women apart, whoever his choice is? That they're going to be hitting them very hard, and it just delays that. And right now, the Biden campaign doing very minimal. As you mentioned earlier, he's not facing reporters every day. I think he's done 2 press availabilities in the last 4 months and answered maybe 8 questions, 10 questions. But they're leading. They're leading by double digits, right? So why mess anything up? Why, if you're
Right.
winning, just stay safe, do no harm. And, I think they want to let that ride out as long as they possibly can.
Yeah. So, speaking of whoever the vice president, his pick might be, do we know if he's leaning in a certain way? Do we know what sort of factors he's looking at? Here's a guy with a tremendous amount of political experience already. He knows what it means to be a vice president. He was a pretty successful vice president. So do we know what he's looking for?
Right. Well, I mean, yes, we do. We know a couple big factors. And one is somebody, I think, who, again, the number one rule, do no harm, right? So you don't want somebody who you're going to have to spend the next several weeks explaining why this woman's qualified or who this woman is, or, something that's going to sort of change the trajectory or the narrative that's happening right now, because again, he's leading, right? Don't mess it up. So there's that. And I think that is one of the overarching principles here. He also wants somebody he can trust, someone he has repeatedly talked about just, being able to, as we talk to a lot of experts in this, they say, Vice President Biden knows better than anyone what it takes to be a VP. And what you want is when there's, a major decision to be made, a major crisis going on, and the staff is divided 50-50, who is the person you take and walk into the Oval Office with you to kind of untangle that mess? Like, who is that person you tap? And I think he's going to be looking at that in part. And that's why, we've heard a lot about recently Susan Rice, because they've had experience in the Oval Office together, in the White House together. They've had, national security advisor, he's foreign policy. I mean, they've had a lot of time in the Obama administration together. Their relationship goes back. But again, Kamala Harris, we keep hearing, is the front runner for many reasons. But one, she has a star quality. She's already been vetted nationally, having run for president as well as Elizabeth Warren. However, as we all know, Joe Biden's been having a lot of pressure from all different groups to choose an African-American running mate. So those are some of the factors that are playing out right now. Karen Bass, again, is one of the she was added to the list sort of later, but she's really been rising up and gaining momentum. And then as well as Tammy Duckworth, who's a senator from Illinois, and of course, lost both her legs in combat and has a incredibly powerful narrative, and also did some time in the Obama administration. So they also have a pre-existing relationship.
Yeah. Well, everyone's anxiously waiting. Let's get on with it. Natasha, thank you so much.
Thank you.